the west, I will put a dot. I don't know if y'all can see that. I'll put a dot on the east and the west. And then what I'll do is I'll drive a steel pin literally in the ground right there. I'm gonna poke a couple holes here. I'll show you why. I'll drive a couple of steel pins in the ground so that I can then string a line from point to point. So if my barn, let's say, is 60 foot wide, I may go out an extra 10 to 15 foot past that, to 80 to 90 foot out past the building, and so that those stakes can stay permanently in the ground while we're doing our layout. Once I have those two pins driven fairly close to the ground, it allows me to be able to take a steel tape and use it as a compass. And so what I'll do is, and I'm going to represent this with this compass, I will take my compass and a little bit more than halfway across, I will draw an arc, a segment of an arc, and then I will draw another one on this side. And usually that's holding a steel tape, having someone hold it on the steel pin very securely, pulling it really tight, and then taking a spray can, upside down spray can, and spraying really close to the ground to make a really narrowed, controlled line. Then I'll put my measure on the other pin and I'll intersect that the same way. If for some reason I miss like this, I just go back to my steel pin that's there permanently and crisscross them. Once I have those two crosses made, I can intersect that line with a line and I'll have a right angle. To show you the complete relationship of what we're accomplishing here, you're actually drawing two half circles is what you're drawing. And so it's unnecessary to go all the way like I'm doing right now, but it shows you the relationship and where those two circles cross. And it doesn't matter if they're big or small, as long as they cross and gives you some distance. Then what you would do is go to those intersecting points, be as precise as possible, and drive two steel pins at those places. Now that you have the 4 steel pins driven at those intersections, you would take a string line and run between them, and I'm going to draw you an actual paint line here now to give you an idea of what it should look like when you get done. If you were using a paint can, you might have green spray paint on there, and you would line up your steel pins with a string, and you could leave your string in place. You can even extend it past those steel pins as far as you need to, and so it lays out a perfect 90. What you end up with is the ability to measure parallel off that line in any direction and use those as control lines, and you can leave those steel pins in place as you build your building, and then always be able to just restring them. Kind of like batter boards, except they're not at every corner of the building. They're not wrapping the corners. It gives you a lot more freedom. So with your drawings, you'll be able to put these lines up quickly, check an offset or dimension from that control line. I'll even go ahead and mark my control lines on my plan where they are in relationship to the rest of the building, so that at any point I can just throw a line up, measure to it. So it works a lot like a batter board with a little bit less to worry about. If these two steel pins are on these intersections, remember you can then run your string line and extend out as far as you want to get it out of the way, and extend that on out past it. Or you can draw this longer and do longer arches to get it on out past it. And that way you just have two perpendicular lines for your two control lines. All right, now that we've determined our right angle lines because of our steel pins and our strings that we can take on or off, another really great trick to be able to double check that you have indeed set this up square then is to use a 6-8-10 or a 3-4-5, or depending on the size foundation, do that on the right angle and check your triangle. Another way to do it is to measure a parallel line off of one or the other of your control lines, and then measure the same distance from the secondary control line out, make a cross line, and then check diagonals on a square or a rectangle of any dimension just to determine whether or not you're actually setting square, and you'll quickly find out whether you're acute or obtuse on this right angle. And you can make adjustments. You can see now the relationship of this indicated building that I drew on here in the blue, where you're able to easily just measure parallel off of that control line to any of these appendages or long lines, and then out from your center or your perpendicular control line out to any parallel line to that. You could come back in there after you've laid them out and do a 6, a 6, 8, 10 or something on these corners just to double check them. But as long as your control lines are perfect 90 degrees, which they should be based on these arches, then you can just measure off of that and run with it. When you have a building with a lot of dimension and windows and offsets and garages and all kinds of things, it really helps to just have this one big control line that runs through the center of the project that everything can be pulled off of. I hope this helps. I hope it's not too confusing, but if you had any questions, put them in the comments below and I'll try and answer anything that I can.